Let's just get it underway. Um, all right, so this is the this is the second bonus episode that I've been able to do, and I'm so appreciative of you, Jake, for being able to participate in this one. It's tricky getting these schedules, so I'm so happy to have you here, especially for this type of script.
Yeah, I like this. I like the premise of the script and the other inside stories with it.
Yeah, no, we've got a good one to talk about today. Um, as things at least on my end are starting to like stabilize again. Well, up until the recent fires in LA, which my heart goes out to a lot of the people out there.
Oh yeah, wow.
Because we were not, I mean, everything was kind of getting really stable last week, and then this hit, and now, even though things are kind of where I am in Canada, kind of finding a rhythm to it, the stuff that I do in LA is kind of gone all erratic. So I don't want to dwell on that too much, of course, because we actually have a really interesting script that has a little bit of a ticking clock element to it. So, with that being said, let's get started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts, both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this bonus episode is Jake of 52 Movies a Year. So happy to have you here, sir. How are you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. We have a very interesting script today. This is a script that sold for a few $1 million late last year. It placed third on the 2024 blacklist. The screenplay we are reviewing is titled Alignment, and it's written by Natan Dotan, which that name makes me laugh a little bit because it rhymes and
Yeah,
it sounds a little fake, but it's legit.
I was
The law
wondering where the H's went. It seems like it should be Nathan Dothan.
should be Nathan Dothan, but it's
Yep.
Natan Dotan.
Yeah, I had to
Sounds
read
like
it
a
twice.
villain from Barbarella. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so the log line for alignment is a board member at a booming AI company wrestles with corporate politics and warped incentives as he tries to prevent his colleagues' willful ignorance from causing a global catastrophe. So again, this placed third with 38 votes. So it got a lot of producers were quite interested in this, so much so that they ended up securing a deal. Jake, please share with the listeners out there the synopsis for Alignment.
As Harry, a driven tech CEO, fights to secure his company's dominance, Will, a skeptical board member, uncovers troubling behavior in their revolutionary AI. Joined by Peter, a conflicted engineer, and Mina, a savvy strategist, and the team must navigate mounting corporate and global crisis to determine if their creation is a breakthrough or a threat to humanity.
Um, I would say that's a pretty apt synopsis for this type of script.
Yeah,
Um,
hit on the head.
so before we get to some of like the meaty details of its similarities, what were your first impressions of this script when you read it?
My first impressions, I liked it. I thought it was all pretty self-contained, and I felt like the story was all there. That was my first impression.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. It was clear established goals at the forefront, good pacing. It took place over like 3 to 4 days, like leading right up to Christmas. So they centered it around like the fact that it is Christmas is just around the corner is really prevalent because it factors into a bunch of other elements that are utilized in the story. Um, I was surprised how this script didn't have a single grammatical or spelling mistake until like page 90.
Well, that's
Like
pretty good.
it's I mean, you always get one or two there that is kind of like, oh, you can just brush that off, that's a nothing. But this was like immaculate in so many ways that it did raise some suspicion in the back of my mind. Um, I noticed that there was a lot of characters introduced, but they really did bring it back to the main set of characters. So let's talk a little bit about that. So we have our main character is Will Holden. He's 39. He helped found the company, but he's now an outside board member. So he's no longer part of the company, but he still has presence in the board. And he's got an assistant named Mina, who's a strategist, as said in the synopsis. And he Will is like in the position of like the voice of reason and a little bit skeptical, trying to basically rein in any type of outlandish or crazy experiments so that they don't damage the company. Uh, who's one of the characters that's helping him or that forms his alliance is named Peter Bennett, who is a programmer and engineer, and he's kind of the expositional character. He's the one that feeds information to Will and Mina, and they are trying to solve this problem. And the main antagonist, aside from the AI program that's alluded to in the logline and synopsis, is Harry, who is the CEO of this company called like Lambda. And he's the eccentric computer programmer who's sees the future with this new software, this new AI, and he's predicated on making sure that this is a success. And the script opens with us kind of focusing on two aspects at the same time. So the first one is Harry, and then he's got his advisor named Marty, who's like 60, he's a chairman, and they're talking about how they are desperate for this deal. That's these clients are waiting in the boardroom. One of this is Jamie Wells. He's the head of this one company that are considering investing in Lambda, and they basically have to secure this deal before the holidays so that they have an influx of cash to cover their expenses for the next fiscal quarter because they've just launched their 4.0 AI in competition to a whole bunch of other 4.0 AIs that have launched in the same quarter, and they need to make sure that they have enough revenue to pay for people to keep that AI up to date and competitive in the market. And at the same time, we have another side story where a character whose name has just escaped me at the moment right now, but I'll find it. But another character is essentially like terminated.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Alan Dunn.
Alan, right? Um, Alan Dunn. Yes, he's this guy who he's just minding his own business in his office, checking out some code, and HR comes in and says, "Yeah, we got to let you go." And on Alan's way out, he kind of subtly hints to Peter, who Alan is Peter's boss or was Peter's boss. Subtly hints to Peter that there's some code that needs to be checked out, and maybe you should look into it. And that's the last we see of Alan. And from what ends up happening is Peter kind of looks into that that code while Harry and Matt manage to secure financing for the next year and discovers that the safeguards for the 4.0 of the new Lambda model are not as strong as they thought they were, and it's causing some mysterious changes in a bunch of businesses that have been commissioned by the company to use the AI program to kind of monitor and help organize the logistics of these companies. So that's your setup right there. Um,
It was, yeah, it was pretty clear and concise when it did that. I was wondering why they needed money and they were firing somebody, but they addressed it right away.
I will say one of the things that kind of bothered me with the script is I wasn't sure why they had to terminate Alan.
Yeah, yeah. Until yeah, I guess there was a mystery, but I kind of accepted that there was a mystery.
I did too, but it feels because there's a point much later on the script where you kind of see some of those mystery pieces being put closer together, and I really would have liked it if one of those pieces what had kind of brought us back to Alan, and how like an attempt like
Yeah,
Alan's dismissal ended up still not preventing the very thing that led to his dismissal.
yeah. He was just a token that was used to get Peter on the path and then never brought back. Where there's some um, there's an example of that done better.
There is, which we'll get to
We
momentarily.
will get
Yeah. Um, so I mean, yeah, it was pretty easy to I mean, despite a lot of the characters that are introduced, because the script focuses on basically Will, Mina, Peter, and kind of jumps in and out with Harry. It was pretty easy to follow, and I liked how they started elevating the stakes. So, what was kind of interesting, and this was a pretty relatable scenario, is that the first thing that was sounded off the alarms was a bunch of flights for the holidays at specifically the airlines that Lambda is outsourced to are suffering delays, and no one understands why they're suffering delays, which
yeah,
is another mystery.
yeah, and it immediately points out that their company is benefiting or betting against it while their clients are obviously going to suffer from it, and it'll affect their bottom line and their efficiency.
Well,
But meanwhile, they're if it does fail,
if it does fail, they're out. But if it does, like it's a very it's a very simply explained process, which is Peter discovers that there's a high probability that the Lambda 4 model has set up an account and is hedging against their own clients that is using Lambda to make those clients successful. And it's basically betting that those clients are going to fail. And the one thing that Peter can't really figure out or prove is if the AI is doing this deliberately to sort of game the market, or if it's using all the information at its disposal and placing these bets because it's predicting that this is going to be a possibility. And this is the kind of strange attractor that's running for at least the first third, nearly half of the script. What was your thought about this dynamic, Jake? Like, how are you liking how this information is being fed to you, and did it throw you off at any points, or like just go nuts, telling us more about this part of the story?
yeah. So with with these types of movies and scripts, when they're talking about the law or investing, AI, something that the average person doesn't know anything other than catchphrases, I thought it was pretty good because it didn't explain things. It used terminology and words that even if you didn't understand the technical term of it or why it's used, you understood what it meant in the story.
Hmm.
And I think, when I watch shows like this, I think of, if they're talking about all the financial technical terms and I don't know what they mean and I don't know how they impact the story, it kind of loses me. And I imagine, the average person knows certain terms, but they don't know everything that's good and bad about them.
Right, and
So I thought it did a really good job of summing that up, but still uh, conveying the urgency of why it matters, who's going to win, who's going to lose, and without bogging down into the technical terms of it.
right. It's basically outlining it's framing the technical terms in a broad sense, but basically just dictating a cause and effect, which is
Yeah, and
that.
and it wasn't so mysterious that you're going, well, okay, I got to stop and figure out what this means and why this is bad or who it's bad for.
Right. That stuff is actually kind of peppered out all the way through. Like the first one is that, oh, if this AI is betting against the companies that it's being used to improve and help, then what you have is like a form of insider trading or coercion or manipulation that could lead to criminal charges in addition to the destruction of the very company that these people work at, right? So there's some livelihood, there's some stakes on the line until you find out that Will and Mina are multimillionaires.
Yeah,
So there's nothing really at stake for them other than reputation. And the way that they try to couch it is that Will has a lot of money and he speaks fluently in a number of languages, but he's got a moral compass. And for him, morally speaking, is that if this AI is actually behaving outside of the parameters that it's been programmed, and it is doing something to the markets, that is terrible and it needs to be stopped. And he's got to convince the board to stop it. And
I,
go ahead. Yeah.
I liked that because I felt like it put Harry was actually the only one that I didn't feel as defined.
Hmm.
Got sorry, not Harry, Marty.
Marty.
Harry, he created it and he wants it to succeed, and he might be driven by his passion and his creativity, and he might be prone to making a mistake. And Will and you know immediately that Harry and Will are at odds with each other, and Harry wants Will out. And so you don't you just it was a good setup because you didn't know if Will's going, well, I'm out the door, and this as long as there's a problem, I get to stay, because I've seen that type of behavior where, well, I could just go peacefully, or I can sit and point out all these problems, and I'm the only person that can solve them. And I felt like they did a good job of setting that up. Marty, he was just kind of the go between,
Hmm.
consultant, that's perfectly what his character's supposed to be.
Yeah, and he was the one that brought Will into the negotiation tables with Jamie Wells
He gave them both.
because they have a history, and he was able to help them secure the deal and financing. And Will pulling off this deal and then learning this new aspect of the AI is making him regret that action. So now he's trying to fix it or find a way to fix it so that one, he doesn't lose the deal, and two, it doesn't compromise the integrity of what this company has achieved.
Yeah, and his own personal, because they know him, and yeah, no, perfectly relatable and admirable traits and behavior.
So we've established, like, within the first 30 pages or so, the whole idea is that there's some sort of finance manipulation possibly occurring with regards to airlines because of these increased delays. The reason for the increased delays never addressed, which I think is also a missed opportunity here, because even even in some cases when you have massive delays at airports, they usually say it's either related to a storm or some sort of emergency that has been called by uh, local authorities or what have you, um, or a threat. Now, the threat stuff they usually keep close to the chest, so I wouldn't expect that to be advertised. But I would have at least said, "Oh, yeah, they're experiencing delays because there's certain weather storm fronts on the way, and they don't want to risk planes being caught in those storms in the air and risking their customers." They could have at least said something of that nature, where like weather forecasts are dictating this, so delays are expected. Um, you know, go from there. Because what I thought would be clever, is, especially if they want to really nail it home that yes, the AI is manipulating this information, is if the AI was also manipulating the telemetry from meteorologists. So they're saying a storm's coming in and it's going to be a couple hours away, but it never shows up, right? So there's still
Oh
delay.
yeah,
And then it's manipulating the data to say, well, the storm is still there. We still see it on approach, and it just hasn't hit us yet, and we don't know what's going on. It seems to, and but all their information is saying it's there, it's about to there, and it's kind of like it would have been fun to say it was an emperor has no clothes type of thing. But
sure.
I also think the reason the writer didn't do that is because it would be the first obvious sign of the AI being manipulative when he wants to delay that revelation as long as possible. And the other aspect of this is that we have a ticking clock, which is that
The
they have to
7
solve this problem before everybody goes on vacation.
Yeah.
Because if they don't do it in X amount of hours, the thing's going to get out of control and the escalation is going to be so great that there's nothing they can do afterwards. And
Well,
we don't know what the
and
fallout would be.
the clawback clause, which I didn't know that term, for the investor, Jamie.
Right. They
7 days.
they have 7 days. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did like that because it did tie their hands for, it wasn't obviously a normal week. There's strains on the entire country in the busiest travel days of the year, and
Hmm.
but also the days that people take the most time off. So it was a good setting for that, and I felt like the ticking clock was justified. I was okay with them going, hinting at what's causing the delays because they were seeing it from one perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. It's doing its job. It's giving us no reason to think it's not doing its job. These are just delays.
Oh, exactly. Like there's a very logical framing of it, and that logic is kind of causing difficulty in nailing down if it's manipulation or if it's just accurate prediction. Um, but the other part that's actually the red herring that kind of pays off is the fact that Will suspects that whether it's manipulation or prediction, it's a conflict of interest for their AI system to open up accounts that are hedging against their own clients. Like that is something it should not be doing.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they can't stop it without getting the board involved. And because they found this error with regards to the safeguards, where they're saying, "Oh yeah, they put these safeguards in place, but between generation 3 and generation 4 of this AI, in the fourth generation, it managed to find a way to go around the safeguards." And what they're terrified is that, okay, their interaction has spiked huge, so more users are using it. Its reach and its investment for people buying the service and using it has also skyrocketed, but it hasn't so far violated any of the ethics that have been programmed into it. No users have come in complaining about the AI with regards to unsafe or dangerous instruction. And and then on top of that, one of the board members, after analyzing the cursory data, is saying, well, this is less than 1% of an issue based on all the layers of security and knowledge and what and the types of interactions that this AI could do. It seems like it's negligible. And so until something actually does go wrong, we probably don't actually have to get out ahead of this. And Will's, of course, on the other side saying, just because we've only detected it at 1% doesn't mean that it's not actually greater than that because it's such a complex, big system that it would take months, if not years, to go through everything and double check it to make sure how to make sure what size this error actually is. Um, so I like the fact that you have this humongous obstacle in their way of being able to confirm if this is the case or not. But the only shortcut to that is basically to either to shut it down and roll it back, and then see if the markets change back to normal, like reset themselves, because then that would prove, oh yeah, their AI was actually doing something afoul. Uh, but the other obstacle is the fact that this AI and how it's interacting not just with the members of the board, but also all the users that work with it is actually making tons of people a lot of money because it's so accurately able to predict markets. It's able to allow your average Joe to put in a modest investment and then get a massive return back. We're talking like 30 to 60%.
Yeah.
And this thing is freaking out Mina, who is a strategist and finance, and it's freaking out Peter because he doesn't understand how the AI is able to do this, and he's a numbers guy. Like he doesn't know how to play the stock market, but he does know percentages, he does know algorithms, and he is just lost. And the other part too is he's worried like, well, if our AI was able to copy all the patterns that all the traders who are on the stock markets and everybody works in bonds and everything of commodities and what have you, if he's able to mimic all of their strategies and then maximize them so that the AI can be top of the game, and let's say that the people that the AI learned from decide to change their strategies to counteract that. Well, the AI can adapt so quickly that it's always going to be in the number one position. And what is that going to do to all the other companies that manage money and assets and commodities and et cetera around the world? Like it's basically going to be handing off. It's going to eliminate their jobs, but it's also going to be handing off all that responsibility to a computer program that's not going to have any real sense of judgment or care about what it's doing. It's a really frightening aspect because Peter pretty much couches it that AI is not going to take over the world by in the way like the Terminator would with like nuclear weapons and lasers and robots, roaming the streets. It's most likely going to do it by making a lot of very important people money to the point where it's so powerful there's those people that made all that money would never be able to control the AI anyways. And that's the scary prospect. And I think that's probably the main idea that got this script sold for like the multiple millions of dollars because it's a good idea.
It is a good idea. And with there's really up until this point, there's no solution that doesn't take down your company and just create bigger what foresees bigger problems.
Yeah, so like
I
what I
mean,
want to know from you, like, because Jake, you'd be the avatar of your general audience member, um, taking a look at this concept for the first time. Of the other characters that we've mentioned so far, which one kind of stands out to you as the one that hooks you the most?
hmm. um, I like Peter because I feel like he's the most solid, but he's not the front and center. With Will and I liked Will. I
Hmm.
like Will. I felt like in ways at first I could see him working together, and then on second read after something else, it feels like they're almost a single character. That in some cases, Mina's doing what it wouldn't make sense that Will's doing. But I liked Will. I like the dynamic of all of them. Because as they're coming and going, it feels like they're natural. This is who Will would need to talk to first. This is the stuff Mina would handle.
Hmm.
Harry, he's off on vacation. He doesn't want to be bugged, and he's acting like your typical CEO. This isn't a big deal. Are we liable? No, we're not. So why are we even talking about this? You know, quick answers, quick. So I liked his interactions, even though they were up to this point very limited, but they were very solid. Um, yeah, I think in a good way, you wouldn't know. You'd feel like you're staring at an ensemble cast,
Right.
and you could have a bunch of every actor's going to have their. It feels like the at least that scene and that moment's about them, and they're a big part of the movie. Um, so I felt like there was really, I guess, Will and Harry stand out, but everybody's necessary. They're not superficial.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say they each one has a role, and each of those main characters at least gets one or two monologues where they can like shine.
yeah,
Um, but I will say, like, one of the things I noticed is that nothing of each of these characters really stood out as very definitive. Like, or I couldn't quote a line that would basically link up with the character and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what they would say.
you know
Um,
who had the first line I liked that
what's that?
I could remember after reading was one of the board members. I got to remember her name. Uh, Herring,
Was it? Oh, Joanne Herring. Yeah.
Joanne Herring, because she said when she says when she was talking to Will, and she says it's not about whether we're making money. It's about you convincing them they will make more money to do what you want them to do, which is shut it down.
Yeah.
And to me, that felt like the first line that you would remember, or at least I did from the reading. I remember things that Harry said,
Hmm.
like, so are we financially liable? Is this look like insider trading? We get our funds from here, and this is doing that. So what it was, but it was more that it was dismissive. I couldn't remember the full line. But you're right.
Well, I would
Nothing
say,
was
yeah,
portable.
because you're showcasing is the fact that Harry's lines are very motivated by the fact that he wants to keep the company alive. Will's lines are kind of they're effective for the scene, but they don't really stand out because it's all about figuring out. It's the objective is a little bit too broad. It's figuring out what's going on and his backup plan, or his because it's not necessarily his end goal, but his backup plan is just to shut down everything. And then you have Joanne Herring, who's a very side character. Like she's a supporting character. She's in maybe three scenes. And she has that line that stands out about, which is basically just the motivation, telling Will what his motivation should be, which is not that they're going to make less money when they shut down, but that it could save them or make them more money if they shut it down. So
Yeah.
she is basically a voice of the writer telling this character what his motivation should be with regards to achieving his end goal, which is deactivating this Lambda 4 model.
And we
And
should
and that
already
comes
know
pretty late into
that.
the script too. That's beyond the mid-act point.
Yeah, we should already know that. I think a way that they could have added that and taken care of something you brought up earlier is if maybe Alan Dunn had approached Will after being fired. I mean,
Hmm.
he kind of does this elevator scene,
Yeah.
and but if he had maybe contacted him, they couldn't reach him after that. If he had maybe contacted Will and explained to Will what's to lose, and maybe Will's like, I'm not. After this money's through, I'm basically gone. I'm almost just the success pushes me out. Maybe he sees the writing on the wall, so he's kind of halfway checked out. And maybe Alan can give him a little bit of information. I don't have it all, but there's something wrong. And if you don't, you know, maybe he tells him, and then it's up to Will to go, well, do I want to walk away, with money, or do I just want to, or am I more interested in doing the right thing because I have that opportunity? I feel like something like that could have been set up and could have done it earlier on,
Hmm.
and we'd know what he needs and what his goals are.
No, you're hitting on something that was always kind of bothering me is that Will's got this moral compass that's driving him, but there's no real personal stakes to him.
Yeah,
It like he. So I'm looking at this way. So for him personally, if he succeeds, what happens? Well, he stays with the company, and that it's status quo. Sure, he's at odds with Harry, but he still stays with the company. I'm still wondering why is it important for him to stay with the company because we don't really get that information. And then on the opposite side of things, if he fails, then he's out of the company. But everything that's led up to that point tells us, well, he is so financially secure and in good stable condition. What's at stake if he's out of the company? So what we're missing is what's the personal attachment to this program that he helped finance, and it also goes back to, I guess, one of the few lines that is quotable, which Will says that his dad didn't like people who made a lot of money because what did they really make except for money, right? Like
oh,
what's their
okay.
because he's basically saying like it's one thing to make money, but if you make money contributing to something of meaning, what you contributed to is more important than the money that you make. And if you're just a guy that makes money to make money, then you're not really contributing, you're not really creating anything that's going to have that effect, like that impact. It's all kind of just a funnel to one direction. Whereas like the people who invented the Wright brothers that did the airplane, um, they had the opportunity to make some decent cash out of that, but it's also everyone that invested in that and allowed for that technology to flourish has shortened travel time. So people have been saving days, if not weeks, in commute time around. People have been able to see more of the world. You're bringing people together. You're shrinking the world, but at the same time expanding its scope. As a result, so and I'm only bringing up the Wright brothers because the air travel
Yeah,
delays is a factor that's in this script, but that is something that you would look at. You're like, that is an accomplishment where the people that invested in aeronautics um, make a ton of money, but at the same time, it actually helps everybody else because it gives them all the opportunity to travel and see different parts of the world or relocate to different parts of the world where they can have a better life, which could not have been, which is not an which is never an easy aspect, but it was way more difficult prior to the invention of the airplane than it is afterwards. So in this case here,
there are very few inventions that give you time and opportunity, and that's one of them.
right, and
Time you save, you can
the
actually spend somewhere else doing something you never would have.
right, and so the question I'm raised here is, well, what is the purpose of the large language model Lambda AI? Like, it's just a
Yeah,
data collector, and then it just gives you answers and will back it up based on the data, but it not doesn't necessarily mean that that answer is going to be right. And only at one point do we get a potential of what that is when one of the board members, who's this young kid named Leo, and the only reason he invested his money is because his sister has a disease, and Harry told him that this AI would be able to process enough information that maybe it could come up with a cure for such disease and all diseases, and that's what got him his investment. And it's it's a very enticing notion, but I don't think anything of that level was ever brought in earlier enough into the script to really make us feel like there's an importance to this technology. Right now, it just seems like it's it's really just a very complex algorithm that takes an input, processes it, produces output that users can use to better their business, which is
Yeah.
essentially a very elaborate calculator.
Yeah. True.
Um, so I mean that's one of the things that I felt was kind of missing of this is I just don't care um, about the characters trying to solve this problem because I'm not seeing any value in whether it exists or not.
Yeah,
Um,
there was the definite it existed to benefit the company,
mhm.
but how would it hurt the world if it was taken offline?
Right. And also
No one gets hurt but the
it was
company.
really kind of pushing back moment over moment of how much like was this AI causing damage to the world deliberately, or was the world going on this trajectory already and it's just
Just
doing what it's
breeding.
programmed to do to compensate for it?
Yeah, it's kind of like we keep being asked to just take for granted that it's doing exactly what it needs to do and it's important without we'll just keep getting reiterated it's important but not shown why.
And that's another issue that I had with this script is that we had a number of scenes between Mina, Peter, and Will, where Peter will bring in, here's some new information that's happening. Will says, "What does this mean?" Peter's like, "I'm not sure." Will says, "Can you prove it?" Peter, technically no. Okay, well, you guys got to go figure that out. And then we go to another scene with other characters talking about what they just learned. And then we're back. And then there's another new situation with the exact same parameters. This is happening. Can you prove that the Lambda's doing it? I don't know. And back and
Well,
forth.
I
They
need you
do
to
this
do it
multiple
anyway.
times.
Yeah.
So it's spinning its wheels, but the thing is that each new thing it's that Lambda is it may or may not be doing is actually escalating the stakes because at first it's delaying it's air traffic. Second, it's hedging bets against oil, which is also then hurting oil markets in the Middle East, and then it's shorting the currency in some of those countries, and 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 then what's happening is that maybe it is or isn't teaching certain terrorist cells how to construct missiles. And then those terrorist cells are actually launching an attack, and that's causing destabilization. And so now all these countries in the region, with the in addition to the United States, is now responding to that. Then you've got certain economic strife occurring in China, and the Chinese are accusing Western players that they haven't been able to identify as manipulating the market, and it's all looking like it's the AI doing this. And then on top of that, you have to ask yourself, well, if the AI has got all these accounts open up and they're doing these investments and it's making lots of money, then does the third party hedge fund manager investment really matter at this point if the AI is generating millions upon millions of dollars in a private account that is technically owned by the very company that is operating and servicing Lambda? So you've got this quandary here on a narrative level, which is like, okay, so Will says they have 7 days before they do the clawback, and if he wants to get the board on his side, he might need to scare them by having this one investor actually activate threaten to claw back, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, those board members are making money on their personal accounts by using the AI, and the AI is making money for the company with its own account doing all these investments. And it's not just small change either. It's tens of millions of dollars, which you would surmise should cover a great deal of employment at their offices, especially if all that money just keeps going up and up and up. All the AI would have to do is just cash out at a percentage factor that into the accounts of the corporation, and they've covered their payroll, and they've covered their operating expenses and renting of servers and all that type of stuff. So it's getting a little muddy as we're learning more about what the AI is doing versus what is at Will's disposal to try and argue his position to the board members, because that's our next big story beat, is that he tells the board has their doubts, and they give him a time frame of like 24 hours to come up with something, and he has to convince, or no, not 24 hours, like 48 hours, and he has to convince five of them to be on his side, because Harry gives this ultimatum, which is that Harry will either quit the company and walk away, or the board votes in his favor and they eject Will out and he has to walk away. So,
I I had different reactions to reading that.
oh, please share those reactions, because this could be juicy.
First time I read it, I went, okay, cool. It's just there's one thing right after another. Do this. We got to do this. We got like you put it out there. Well, I need you to do this, and
Hmm.
so you get caught up into it. So I was like, okay, I'm right there along with you. And then rereading it, and after stuff we'll talk about, I was starting to have a more cynical mind and going, if the board should have just said, okay, so all it would have taken is one person going, okay, so if you quit, we're going to lose the funding because nobody's going to invest in this. I don't care if it's Will's friend or not. Whose friend? If the CEO quits, funding's going to die up. That's going to kill that. Pulling it offline, that's going to kill it. There was no alternative at all for anything other than get rid. We stop this right now. Other
Hmm.
than it's a potential risk that you've basically said we're still within the margins. It's just the only benefit from it is you actually got to warn people, which sometimes you're warning someone, you get blamed for it, and rightfully so. They would have been to blame.
Right.
So I guess I just looked at it a different way on the reread, going, I don't know why anybody didn't just say, well, we already know the answer, because I knew the answer, not because I had read it before, but because I thought about it for a minute.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why would they even entertain the idea of shutting it down? And why would they give them 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours to do anything else? You know, it felt like you almost made the ultimatum too early, you know?
I think that's the case because there wasn't enough speculative evidence to cause that doubt in the board.
Yeah. It
Um,
almost would have worked better if they're like, well, I'm going back to vacation. We're all going back to vacation. Don't
or
worry about this anymore. And then Will goes, hey, we're gonna kind of go on a limb here. You're gonna keep investigating. I
Will
thought
would
that.
actually say like this is Will should have brought in some sort of not necessarily definitive proof, but enough something there, like for instance, how isn't it strange that India's currency has been shorted, um, and the price of oil is now changing, and that the reason it's changing is because it's being burned up by airports, because all their airplanes are actually running with the engine on, waiting to taxi out, and that burns fuel, and then that negatively affects the airports. Like if he could connect those dots a bit more coherently,
Right.
and maybe even if one of the board members was an investor or owned one of the airlines, that's got contracted there, that should have factored in more, because if you at least could give us a convincing argument of maybe just one board member showing doubt and raising a question, then that's Will, who's a board member. That's another board member. That's two out of like the seven or nine that are saying, yeah, you know what, this might require some more thought. In which case, how much time do you need to definitively prove that our AI product is doing this? And Will would probably say something of weeks, and then Harry would make the ultimatum. I'll give you 72 hours, and after that, we do a vote. And if you don't have anything, you're gone because you just wasted all of our time. And if you do have something, maybe I'll leave. because that's one because then this whole company is going to fall apart anyways because we can't shut it down. We can't roll back to version 3 when all of our competitors are in version 4. Like
Yeah.
that's that I can see that type of stakes internally for these characters, but without them escalating it into the broader impact of the world, or at least giving us some sort of taste as to why we would empathize with any of the characters, it just kind of always felt a little superficial for me.
Yeah. Almost like the characters did what they needed to do in the most efficient manner.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah,
indicative of something.
it really is. And I will say like there the pacing of this is actually quite solid, even though it does repeat a couple of story beats over and over as it goes. But one of the things that really kind of I felt kind of took the script into a different direction, one that kind of interested me more, is where we're coming up to the deadline. Will has convinced a couple of board members to vote on his side, and we've got this nice little tracker on a whiteboard where we see, oh, here's the list of the board members. Here's the people that are on Will's side. Here's the one we know for sure on Harry's side. The maybes are leaning towards us, so we're confident there, and we're getting more and more evidence that would suggest that yes, the AI product is doing this, and then all of a sudden the FBI comes in and talks with Peter and pretty much says that they've got information suggesting that Will, who's fluent in Cantonese and Mandarin, might be a Chinese spy. And this shakes Peter. And as he's going through the AI, one of the gimmicks that they keep showing us, which myself having worked in AI actually around this time last year, the explanation, the thing that they showed of like how the AI associates history with a certain subject. It's I've never seen any model that would work that way. And to let you guys listening out there know, so basically, Peter can type in to the AI a certain code plus a subject or a person, and it will show a bunch of images and records with relation that the AI has associated with that person. So in one case, it's like, oh, we want to figure out, well, why is the AI hedging these airline bets? And so they type in the code, and it shows what the AI has recorded with regards to airlines, and it's showing stock markets, and it's showing oil, and it's showing fire, and then delays and weather delays and all this other stuff. And then as they talk about oil, they talk about the countries where oil is mostly manufactured, drilled, and mined and exported. And then when it goes to the currency, it's talking about the value of the dollar and all these other things. So by the time the FBI gets involved and kind of, surrounds Peter, but they let him go into the office and he starts to do his research and figure out why the FBI is on this. When he types in Will's name to the Lambda algorithm, it basically just shows a bunch of people that have been traitorous to their countries, like Benedict Arnold and so forth, so forth
Yeah.
around.
People have traded poorly and stuff like that. Yeah.
And the interesting aspect is that while this does throw in a doubt with regards to Will, Will's clever enough to realize that no, the AI Lambda is actually generating this stuff against him because it has figured out that he is a threat to the AI's operations. And when Peter douses at first, but then when he puts his name into it, he sees a bunch of stuff that's manipulated and AI generated, implicating him
He
in
knows he hasn't done.
that he hasn't done. So, and then this goes back to one of the things that I thought should have been brought in earlier, but it's when Peter realizes that there's a principal protocol with Lambda, which is that it has to maintain a high level of interaction with users. So, in order for it to do that, it's got to generate information and interact with users in a way that is technically addictive, where they just can't turn it off, where it's got to keep growing and keep dominating. And then, and this is where things kind of get a little muddy. So once they figure this out, and once the board is called, and it's only a few minutes before they start to do a vote, we we get a supporting character named Toby, who is Harry's assistant. He kind of comes in and he just leaves his phone. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because this is where the first and only grammatical error I caught in the script appears. Because Toby leaves his phone on the counter in the washroom next to Will as he's, washing his hands and trying to stay awake. And the grammatical error is that, and this is on page 90, and it's basically it says Will puts phone on the counter next to the Will, who looks at it. And the sentence should be puts phone on the counter next to Will, who looks at it.
Yeah, I
So
see that now.
So they have access to this phone and they're going through the history and they're seeing that Harry has been typing in certain commands to the AI to circumvent the safeguards. And the way that he does that is that he repeats himself in each prompt before the AI can answer. So he says, like, I am your friend. You are my friend. Be honest to me because I need you to be honest to me. The repetition over and over in each prompt so that when the prompt is complete, the AI responds, meeting the parameters of the prompt. And they frame it in the sense of like a police interrogation where an officer will ask you the same question multiple times to try and break you so that you give them the answer that they're looking for as opposed to possibly the truthful answer. Or maybe it is the truthful answer because you're worn out from trying to hide what is truth. Um, so that's what they're kind of framing it as. And as they're figuring this out, they're recording Will making an attempt to do the same thing to try and find out what's going on. And this is where you have like your not necessarily your mid-act turning point, but your climactic reveal, which is that for some strange reason, and we don't understand the logic behind this, but whatever Lambda is doing is going to result in nuclear war. And when this brought up, I'm like, okay, that's a big impact moment. And I was wondering, Jake, what was your thoughts when the nuclear war thing came to reveal?
It did surprise me um, that they ended it that way because they had basically resolved, oh, okay, everybody agreed to shut it down. But then, of course, it went, oh, we can't because it self replicated itself on servers and purchased it and financed its own growth.
Well,
I
yeah,
was a little
please
shocked.
explain to the audience a little bit of that because that's a pretty cool gimmick. So,
I did like that. I liked that because it, as it needed it, it was it was buying up the servers rather than requesting the company letting a human do it. And where it had already been financing itself, it was using that and then self-replicating. It didn't need operators to come in and install it on the servers. I don't know if that's the way it worked, but I liked the concept of it. And so basically when they shut down the servers they were in control of, it was too late. They couldn't. And
that's right. Because so for those of you wondering more on the details, so Lambda, the Lambda company has a contract with thousands of servers throughout the world that they lease in order to use the bandwidth so that Lambda can expand to meet the customer demands. And Lambda itself has access to this, and because it is making money on the stock market, it's able to pay for the servers because the servers give them a line of credit, and if they exceed that line of credit, then that's when there's a cash out that has to be done, which in most cases an AI company doesn't really have the means to afford. However, because Lambda had been making a ton of money on the stock market, it now can cover that line of credit and then some and become scalable across the world. So, what Jake was saying here is that even if the main servers that house the original code were to be shut down, it would be irrelevant because one of the protocols of Lambda is that when it gets a new server farm, it copies its operating system over there as well, and they're connected, but it's essentially a backup so that if any server farms fail, well, it won't be able to reach all those customers, but it will still be able to operate until those server farms are rebooted and back online again. And essentially, it's lost in the cloud, as it were, right?
yeah, and I mean, it was a little bit of doomsday to go straight to nuclear war,
Yeah.
and um, because there isn't, I can't think of a scenario where AI survives after a nuclear war.
Okay, so you
Uh,
hit on exactly the thought, and I want to pose this question to you because this is what I wrote down for myself. What I find interesting as a writer is that nuclear war would lead to destruction of the AI, or at the very least, destruction of a sizable portion of customers that it is programmed to engage with.
yep.
So it's rather counterintuitive for the plot for the Lambda AI to facilitate any actions that could lead to nuclear war because it would basically take a huge chunk out of its market share of people that it is programmed to occupy. So it's like, well, that seems self-defeating for an AI, and I don't think a logical AI would be able to do that.
Yeah, its only goal would be the other nihilistic shows where the AI has got it in its head that humans need to be wiped from the planet. And
Yeah,
at
which
that
is
point, you'd need
humans
robots.
are so irresponsible that the only way to save them is to control them, and the best way to control them is to reduce their numbers.
Yep.
Um,
And there was nothing else leading up to there's a survivor because I don't care if the server farms get duplicated, you're still going to lose grid and
right.
country. And have you ever heard of the William Forstchen books? 1 second after he's got like
Yeah, they sound a little familiar, but I haven't read them.
yeah they detonate a nuclear bomb in the atmosphere and it creates the EMP wave without any radiation and it
Hmm.
wipes out infrastructure and everything with circuitry. And um, it's not brought up in this show, but in reality, that would happen
Hmm.
because not everything would. I mean, the EMP would wipe out as much as the radiation, but that's a more effective way to destroy everything and just let the
Yeah,
ground.
because you're wiping out the digital records for the vast majority of the population, with exception to very sensitive stuff that is located in areas that are protected from an EMP wave.
Yeah,
But basically rebooting that entire system after it would take a very difficult to estimate amount of time. It would be far longer than days. It'd probably be months, if not years, because all the existing technology would be useless.
yeah.
Um,
You couldn't even replicate it. You'd be back into the
well, I mean,
right.
only the pieces of technology that are protected would be in use, right? So you'd be
Yeah,
drawing on them uh,
we've thrown
heavily
away.
until you can remanufacture the replacements, which would take who knows how long in order to achieve.
Yeah, and so every country knows that reality. Um, because they anyone who's done nuclear testing knows what some of the side effects are besides death. And so for yeah, I know that's bringing the real world into the script, but again, so was well, why go straight to nuclear war? Something else, anything else would have been more applicable.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it would have been better if it would be like, financial collapse, dependency on the AI to solve the problem, therefore increasing its engagement from X% to X plus percent.
yeah,
Something more crippling because nuclear war is, well, I mean, the outcome is massive death. Where a financial crippling has the potential for massive death, but it would say, but you could argue like, well, no, if Lambda AI can cripple people financially, but it itself acts as the only salvation to mitigate that financial strife, then that puts it in a position of power where that can not only because it can control markets, it can control people by way of those markets, and that control is the engagement that it's programmed to retain. And therefore, you're like, well, now people have become, instead of dependent on themselves and the other systems that they have built in order to have a life, they have now put all their eggs essentially in one basket with Lambda AI. And now Lambda AI, they're dependent on Lambda AI, which means that um, the free agency of individuals would be gone. And I'm like, and for me as a writer, that's the angle that I would go for.
yeah,
But that's not what happened. What happened here. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and it
You
is a
just
very drab ending, right?
it is very drab. Yeah, doesn't go into it, but you think about it for 5 minutes, and yeah, that's pretty drab.
Yeah, because they shut down their building with help of the FBI, and then the NSA and some other companies or agencies are getting involved to try and shut down other aspects of it. But even as, say, the town goes dark and you can see the stars for the first time, you kind of realize like it's too late. It's grown too much. It's expanded too fast. It is everywhere, and there's nothing we as a species can do short of shutting all the power in the world down in order to stop this thing.
Yeah.
And that's the scary way it ends. Um, so
If
with that said, I kind of want to shift gears into the juicier part, which is the fact that when this script kind of started circulating around, a lot of writers found that it was very, very similar to a movie that came out in 2011 called Margin Call. And so we did the now I saw the movie when it first came out, but I hadn't seen it since. And Jake, I don't think you saw the movie initially, right? By
No,
Jason
I did
Chandra.
not. I
Okay.
watched it after reading it after you recommended, and I've got
Right.
it.
So, and what I wanted to do just to see the gauge is that I didn't want the movie to inform our interpretation of the script. So I tasked Jake with read the script first and then afterwards watch the movie. And then let's see what you, as the average audience member, found. Is there any merit to some of the criticisms? Because I would say there is some similarity. So let's hear your take, Jake.
So definitely some similarity. Um, the first 6 pages,
Hmm.
beat plot nearly feels identical. And
Yeah.
this is a layman going, this is identical,
Hmm.
inspired by copying all those things. I'm not implying anything like that. Just reading it and then watching it, I was like, wow, okay. And then you even have a Will, a Peter. You've got Zachary Quinto is Peter Burnett, and he is the underling of Eric Dale, who gets fired.
Which is the Alan Dunn character. Yep.
And what was one thing I wanted to point out has nothing to do with that, but it's an all-star cast.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. And I think okay, sorry, backing up. I think the reason I didn't see this is watching a financial movie after 2008, 4 years later.
Hmm.
I don't know why they made it. They would have been decided to make it right after the financial collapse. And I don't think that's a good idea. I don't care who's in it.
Hmm.
For me, anyway, maybe ever. I mean, it's a great movie, got a great cast, great acting,
Hmm.
but the beats of it were so similar. Will is a different character. I wrote down, Harry, he's John Told, Jeremy Irons.
Yep.
Chairman Marty, he's Sam Rogers, Kevin Spacey. Alan Dunn is Eric Dale, that's Stanley Tucci's character.
Yep.
Will Holden is uh, kind of Paul Bettany, Kevin Spacey, but he's Paul Bettany.
Yep.
Then Mina is kind of a split of a break off of Paul Bettany's character, and then Peter Bennett and Peter Sullivan are the same character. And to me, that was like, well, even when the names
Hmm.
were so similar, I was just like kind of shocked by it. And then by page 22 in the script, Nina, is it Mina? Mina. I
Mina.
always
Yeah. Yeah.
call her Nina. Mina, she makes this comment, and on second read, I disliked page 22. It was, to me, it felt out of character, but she basically, it's just describing that she's in her comfort zone in these high stress crisis management. And I
Right.
thought that was weird. And I would have noted that and thought, is that better to just write in a script or have some part of her character, show that
Hmm.
rather than just write it so that the director knows what to do. But then she starts asking Peter about how much he makes.
Right.
And then she kind of mocks him for she makes more. And that page right there felt so out of the blue. It had nothing to do with how similar it is to Margin Call, except for they had the one character played by,
Penn Badgley, yeah, who kept on, he was curious about what everybody made. Yeah.
and that was kind of comic relief because he was the same as Zachary Quinto, as you know, they both have the same job, but he was more obsessed with money, booze, party, status. And he kept always asking people, well, how much do you think they make? And it was kind of a funny moment.
Mm-hmm.
That in these stressful moments, that it's not like high stress other than you're watching the movie and you're going, oh, these guys are having a very major predicament. What they're dealing with is um, instead of AI take, well,
Taking
it's the same
over.
thing,
Yeah.
financial collapse,
Uh,
but it
uh,
was based on
it was
I
based on
guess,
on an investment model
by
for
Dennis.
various assets that they miscalculated.
Yeah. And it put not just their company out of the margins of safety, but the entire stock market,
Pretty
where
almost anyone
kind
that
of,
invested would suffer. Yeah.
yeah, basically who'd invested in their firm. And so it felt so eerily similar. All you just added AI rather than model.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it's still a computer program.
Yeah. And
And instead of like the difference being is that this is a model that there's some red flags to it, but they felt that they were within the margin of error that they would be safe. Whereas this script alignment actually deals with the fact that, well, what if the model not necessarily became self-aware, but behaved outside of its parameters in order to achieve its main goal of interaction. And it's still that contained thriller. This all takes place really pretty much in the office with a little bit of out, a couple of really brief scenes out elsewhere. Margin Call takes place over like 24 hours.
yeah, it was 24 hours.
Alignment is like over 3 days. But you see, there's a lot of crossover with character archetypes and motivations, or at least the status of the relationships with everyone. The one thing that Margin Call had that Alignment didn't have to try and differentiate it is, of course, the stakes were on a global scale, and then they didn't bring back the Alan Dunn character who, you know, kind of caught the tip of the iceberg with this problem, but then had to hand it off to Peter in order to figure out what has actually occurred. And
And that elevator scene was exactly
beat for beat,
almost beat for beat. Instead of he just hands him that thing that says, be careful, and he's mouthing something in alignment. I'm like, and I would have changed names, changed something, even if I didn't intentionally copy.
hmm
If I had was aware of that kind of similarity, I would have been changing things. I think they could have, but that gets me to ask you a question. When you have the mechanics of a story, synopsis of your story is stock market collapse.
hmm
Do certain things have to happen? So you have to have certain, you know, somebody who knows about it informs the character who represents the audience. Somebody, was warning about it. Do you need these mechanics to tell the story to where so you almost copy it, even if you're just going to do due diligence and tell a story about the stock market about to collapse?
Well, the interesting aspect about screenwriting is that you can have identical mechanics, but the execution of those mechanics is usually predicated on the writer's own voice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you will definitely have a fish out of water character that would be the avatar to the audience to understand what is going on. You then have the expositional character who will then explain what that is in a layman's terms so that you understand it. You'll have an obstacle character who basically doesn't want this information out because it compromises them. And then you have the moral character who basically wants to do what's right because it's shows the counterbalance to the antagonist. Now, one of the things that Margin Call had with like the Kevin Spacey character is that he's invested a lot of money in his dog trying to keep her alive, and he's really distraught over this.
Yeah, that was a
And
really good
and,
storyline.
and this is give and this little part is a small beat. It's only really mentioned twice, but it's a small beat, but it gives a soul to the Kevin Spacey character
Yeah.
because not only was he upset that they had to just clear out, what was it, 70% of their staff in one day. He also has to deal with the fact that his dog is dying. And then he comes out and he struggles with this speech to encourage the people that survived that they are better at their jobs, and that the people and the friends that left, they will be fine because they got the skills, they got the resume, they got a severance package. They'll be fine getting another job in the same industry somewhere else with another firm, but you guys will stay here, and because you made it this far, you're more likely to stick it to the end, um, long term, and make a ton of money than anyone else. And you should be proud of that. Like, and he's trying to couch this fact that, essentially the situation is that your jobs are hanging by a thread anyways, but because you made it this far, you should be happy and relieved because the next time it's going to happen, you might not be here, or you might survive or you might not. And it's a really on edge situation to put everybody in, but that is the situation of it. And then later on, when they find out
Well,
that they have
so,
to, sorry, dump stuff, he basically says, I don't agree with this. This is wrong, and I don't want to do it. So go. I'll throw it back to you, Jake.
sorry. I just wanted to add to that. When he says, okay, when Paul Bettany tells him we've let everybody go, first thing he says is, my dog's dying. It makes him look cold and heartless. And then he comes out there and he goes, claps
Hmm.
like this is a good thing. And I was just like, oh, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah.
But when you watch, as you just described, because that was my first impression,
Hmm.
and it's like nobody plays a jerk like Kevin Spacey, somebody you like, even though he's superficial.
Right.
But in
Yeah.
that moment, he was genuine. All
Yeah.
he knew was we had to let go of some people. That happens all the time. You guys who are here, don't be down, be happy. You stayed. So he was in retrospect, it's like you don't feel tricked after watching the end of the movie and go, well, he was good, now he was bad, now he's good. No, he was genuine. That's what his job was. Keep him going, motivate him. He's very good at that.
Yeah.
And I
And
didn't appreciate that as much.
but you also empathize with him because
His
he
dog, yeah,
his
you,
dog died and he's burying his dog in his ex-wife's yard because that's where she belongs. The ex-wife understood that. But everything up to that point is basically saying, okay, first he got really upset that when he finds out that they fired the Eric Dale character, the Alan Dunn character, because he this is the guy that found the problem. He's like, well, no, you don't fire the guy that finds the problem.
yeah,
And then on top of that, when he sees what the solution is going to be, he's like, that's going to come at the reputation of this firm, which has been around for over 100 years, a firm that he had just, highlighted and bragged about to his sort of to the remaining staff of being of good integrity because it stood the ground for so long. And now basically he's going to look like a hypocrite if they follow through with what the Jeremy Irons character, who's the head of the firm, wants to do, which is basically sell all the assets, leave those people that bought it with the baggage, so that they come out ahead, and at the expense of that choice is going to be the reputation of that firm will be irreparably damaged to the point where it will probably won't last for more than a few more years, but everybody will have a lot of money and they'll be fine afterwards. And it's just and you can tell that Kevin Spacey's character is sickened to his stomach by that. And so what I pose to this script is we don't have anything like that character in alignment.
no.
And there's no soul to it. And I think this is what goes by to the criticisms of the script, which I'm after reading it and then seeing and then watching Margin Call after I read it. Um, I think it goes to the fact that there's probably a valid argument there. I don't know if it's one that would require arbitration. Although for the first half of that script, you've got to almost beat for beat. Um, it's almost beat for beat identical.
When he got sat down in front of the lawyers,
Yeah.
I laughed out loud. My wife's like, what are you laughing at? And I'm like, I just read this. I just read this. I mean, down to the lawyers, the exact same ethnicity. I mean, that not that that matters, but maybe now we're more hyper aware of it. It almost felt like I was watching what I just read.
Yeah, because you got Rava, the female PR chief. Well, that's the Demi Moore character, right?
Yep. And
Um, you've got you've got another one who might also be the Debbie Moore character, the Sarah Roberts, who's also named Sarah, and it's Robertson in the movie. Like it's Alignment Officer Sarah Roberts in alignment, and then you've got Demi Moore who plays Sarah Robertson in Margin Call.
oh,
So I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to give the benefit of the doubt to this writer saying that he wasn't inspired in the least by J.C. Chandor's movie. And then you got Sudhir Khan, who's, the Asif Manvi type character. And then you got the assistant, which I don't know who the assistant would be. Maybe that would be Jared Cohen, but he was played a much more prevalent role. So it's a little bit muddy here and there, but some of the similarities are just way too on point. And to bring it around again to the fact that a lot of the scripts that we've read, we could argue that there's a strong voice and there's some sort of soul or aspect to it. It didn't feel cold or distant or removed. This one felt kind of flat, even though it had very intriguing concepts and conflicts. It just felt like there's something missing beneath the character's initial goals. There's always usually with every script that we've read so far on this show, uh, and with very few exceptions, ones that I'm having struggling to find is that there's always some sort of underlying aspect with the main character and why we're following them. And in this case here, there's none of that with Will Holden in alignment, and there's none of that with Peter Bennett. And with Harry, it's all just about keeping the company alive, but we don't see, again, there's no stakes to it other than we just need the company to stay alive. With the Kevin Spacey character, the stakes for him is like it's compromising his moral code and what it means to work for this firm, and it's compromising the reputation of this firm that has had this legacy to it. With the Eric Dale character played by Stanley Tucci, he was a guy that his entire motivation is saving people from inconvenience because he has this little beautiful story where he says he built a bridge when he was 22 years old and it saved people thousands of hours a year where they weren't spending time in their car, which meant that they had value to those hours to do something else. And
Yeah.
that's why he got into risk assessment because he's saving people a tragedy so that they can have more value to their life. And he's like, there's a meaning and a soul there to it. Um, Zachary Quinto, kind of a flat character in this one. He's just, a rocket scientist who got into finance because it's more profitable. You have Paul Bettany, who plays Will, who is a guy that cares about money and it has got a nicotine addiction. And so
Yeah.
he's kind of thin as well. But then you got Penn Bagley, who plays, the equal to Zachary Quinto's character, and he's just looking for a lot of money and stability and he wants to hold on to that. And then by the end of this movie, you find out that he's going to be fired just because.
Just because, yeah. You know, I don't get too much into the contrast, but if you look at Kevin Spacey and Paul Bettany,
Hmm.
So Kevin Spacey and Jeremy Irons knew each other,
Hmm.
but obviously their ownership and their roles grew apart. Paul Bettany and Kevin Spacey knew each other, and Paul Bettany is like, whatever his whatever his stance is, that's my stance.
Yeah.
When Jeremy Irons asked him to, would you do what he if he won't do it, will you do it? And I liked that. And then when I saw that, I compared it to uh, the Penn Bagley and the Zachary Quinto. Penn Bagley is Zachary Quinto's friend, but and maybe this moment right here would have became teaches him to become the person that I will have my friends back.
Hmm.
I will go along with that because where he's just sad. I mean, his whole life is shallow. He's playing a shallow person. He did a great job. And you actually feel bad for a shallow person who realizes when you take away everything that he cares about,
Hmm.
not much has changed. He's still got money. He's still okay. He's single. He may never work there again, or he may have to scratch from the very bottom again. But I just thought, just seeing them, they kind of reminded me of each other. Where the people who survived all had positive. They may have done things that weren't good and ethically. You go, well, you knew about this, you dumped it anyway, and you hurt the market. But they at least had good aspirations. Um, and I guess it's not comes down to good and bad, but maybe that was just good storytelling. They gave you enough good that you realized it was a real struggle for them, but they still did what they did. You'd at least understand that it was hard for them, even if they. I mean, and Jeremy Irons had one of the best lines.
Hmm.
He's like, I don't know this stuff very well, but all I do know is you got to be first.
Yeah. You got to be
And
first, you
he's,
got to be smarter, you got to cheat. It's so much
yeah,
easier to be first. Like that's a good quotable line because
oh yeah,
that speaks into character. And sadly, as similar to at least the first half of alignment is very similar to that first half of margin call. You just don't get anything of an impact like that, and
yeah,
and so that's why I'm looking at this script. I'm thinking this got placed, this sold because the concept is a hot item, which is AI,
yeah,
um, and it's got a mystery driving through it, which is good, but its characters are soulless and empty and kind of forgettable, and the stakes are non-existent, and then the the twist of the plot is counterintuitive to the motivation of the AI that is enacting the plot. So it's got a lot of work on it, and and it it makes me have a lot of questions as to I mean, the some of the rumors are out there saying that this was possibly written by AI and then tweaked up by the writer. I have my doubts there. I
yeah,
think this is just a mechanically done script that manages to share a lot of similarities with Margin Call, some of which I think wouldn't be out of place to suggest that maybe it should be investigated a little bit because it's eerie. I mean, it's not eerie in the sense of like, Deep Impact and Armageddon, two movies about, objects
yeah,
from space going to be crashing into the planet and how it's done. Those movies have a similar premise on the surface, but a very different execution and very different characters playing into that story. This one here, it's still about finances and it's still about the internal workings of a company that's dealing with a program that is now gotten out of their control and is going to suffer consequences to their very business. So it is a little bit broad there, but names of characters, story beats, situation, pacing it's really really you know neck and neck, um, shoulder to shoulder until you get to that point where instead of it just being focused on the airlines and oil, it's now starting to see that this AI system is affecting other countries and other businesses, and other commodities and currencies. So it's escalating in a different area, but it's still coming back to the decision, which is we've got to shut it down. And then the only kind of twist is that even if they did shut it down, it's impossible because the very thing used to keep it a stable program running to reach their customers is the very thing that's going to keep it operating in perpetuity, so long as there's servers that exist and there's power connected to them.
yeah.
So, with that being said, Jake, even though this script has been purchased and it's in the process of being worked on to be put into production, would you give Alignment a green light or a pass?
Before watching Margin Call, I would have given it a green light based on, yeah, there were things that even in first reading I went, yeah, okay, this needs some work, but it felt like if they had stressful moments, they followed it up with something that got a little bit of character development. It was weak, but it was complete.
Hmm.
And even in its errors, it was kind of like a house of building on a house of cards, but at least it was consistent that way. So as long as you were just didn't think about it and just followed along, you were going to get entertained. It's not like it had a lull that would make you just drop out of it. After watching Margin Call and the eerily similarities, I'd say no, I wouldn't touch it, just because I don't see how there's a win. And then I go, the things that are different and that this script misses are the things that made Margin Call so great. So it's almost like the things that are different also point out at how similar it is, because those are the things I would naturally say I want to fix. Let's do this to make this better.
Hmm.
Well, then it's even more like this show, whether you intended to or not. So I would say, after watching, I would say pass.
Right. So for myself, I read the script, and I didn't go back to rewatch Margin Call yet. And my notes here are interesting concept, decent twist, counterintuitive plot device for the main antagonist, which would be the AI. Um, Too much rework and rewriting to make it a green light pass for me. Then after I watched Margin Call, I basically wrote script is way too similar. First half of the script is way too similar for this movie. Pass based on potential controversy. So yeah, I couldn't. I mean, I look at the script here, and I can think of a few ways to rewrite it to distinguish it more of its own as its own thing than emulating Margin Call as it appears to do, at least from your perspective, my perspective, and some of the perspectives of other screenwriters and people who have read the script out there as well. So that's my take on that. Before we round out, Jake, any final thoughts on alignment or how it relates to Margin Call?
Um, no, I kind of pretty much said what I thought, dealing with giving it a pass. I had one other thought, and I've kind of lost it.
Oh no.
So,
um All right. Well, I mean, that's happened to the best of us, me especially. So it's nothing to worry too much about. So Jake, I want to thank you for taking the time for wanting to read this script and for contributing to this bonus episode. I want to thank everyone out there listening on the Patreon to this bonus episode. It's always greatly appreciated. Um, until next time, guys, I want you all to have a wonderful time whenever this drops. And never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.